Hi, my name is Hilary Stupa, and I am a developer with Qdabra software. And for today's webinar, what I want to talk to you about is a recently discovered qRules bug. I just want to let everybody know about it, let you know how to diagnose if you're being affected by it, and just kind of walk through what's going to show you whether or not you've got a problem associated with this issue. So the backstory on this, we saw the issue a couple weeks ago on a recently patched SharePoint 2013 server. This server did not at that time have SP1 installed. So this was pre-installation of Service Pack 1. It was a SharePoint 2013 server. We had forms that had been in this production server for months now and had not had these specific issues. So all of the logic had been working as anticipated. On a Wednesday night, some patches were installed, and on Thursday, my universe started to collapse in upon itself because I had all of these weird issues that I could not diagnose or understand. As we were investigating the issue, we also realized that we could reproduce it on a SharePoint 2010 server. That 2010 server had been patched, and again, these were just the Microsoft security patches, which apparently sometimes have SharePoint stuff incorporated in them. I don't know a whole bunch about that. But at any rate, we had a 2010 server that had been recently patched, and we were able to reproduce this issue on that server as well. The affected forms were all admin deploy forms. Let me get my slides switched here. They were all admin deploy browser forms. The main places we were seeing problems and where it was really highlighted for me that something was going wrong were with get input parameter command, swap DOM with document. If you use DBXL, you may be familiar with that command. I'll go into it here in just a second. And transform commands. I did see in some of the affected forms an issue with commands appearing to interfere with each other. So I was seeing, hopefully everybody's familiar with the execution history group in Qdabra rules in the later versions that show you what command's been executed and what the results were. So what I was seeing was for a swap DOM command a result of a GUID. So it was as if the wrong command had run altogether. I'm going to share out a quick poll here just to find out what version of qRules people are running. Let me make sure I do it right. We'll go ahead and leave that up here for just a couple more seconds so everybody has a chance to vote. If you are using anything later than qRules 5.2 or later, there is in the Qdabra rules data source a group called execution history, and I usually just put that on a debug view in any form I work on so that I can click over and see what commands have run. So we've got about 67% participation, so I'm going to go ahead and just close this guy, and we have about 40% using version 6 something and about 40% using version 7 something, and a few people are still using version 4 or earlier. Some folks don't have it yet. So it looks like most people are on a version that does have the execution history, and you'll see that I'm going to leverage that when I demo this for you and kind of show you what the bug is. If you don't have that option in your version of qRules, you can always add a rule to the command node that when it changes and it's not blank, it goes and concatenates the value into another field. So you can kind of DIY a little bit of a log to let you know what's been happening in your form as your commands run. At any rate, we were seeing this in an environment that had a number of admin deploy forms. It had 43 admin deploy forms. I know this because of the fact that we had so many forms to redeploy. And And these forms were activated to different site collections, and yet we were still seeing interference between them. So that's what it really came down to. These forms were interfering with each other. And I'll show you a demonstration of that here in just one second. We're going to hit this slide. We'll demo. I'll show you how to see if you have this issue in your environment. So to check for it, I took or to demo it for you folks, I've got two different XSNs, and they've got slightly different schemas. We add the qRules command node so that we can just execute whatever command our little heart desires, and I've got the execution history up there so we can kind of keep track of what's going on. I also have a field that I can return transform results to, because the transform command is pretty useful for diagnosing this problem. And then you can open both forms in the browser and execute a command like this one. I included it in the slide so that when you get the deck, you've got kind of a written out version. You'll also find it in I'll include some notes with the webinar packet, so you've got some of that as well. So what I'm doing here is I'm doing a transform command. The source file, if you're familiar with the form files that make up an InfoPath XSN, template.xml is the source file that is used when your form is brand new. So when you open up a brand new form, template XML is what InfoPath is basing the XML on. So I'm using template XML. The XSLT file I'm using is the upgrade XSL, which if your form is set to upgrade existing XML, that's going to be built in and in your packet, in your template files as well. And here I'm setting just a random field to the returned XML. This will make sense as I demo it. I'm going to go ahead and just pause the slideshow and see if I can figure out how to find my taskbar. Let me show you my two forms real quick. They look exactly the same, which is super helpful, I know. The only difference here is in the schema. You can see over here in the main data source. Let me just wait until this finishes resolving there. It looks like it's up for you now. You can see over here in the main data source in this form, field 1 is what we've got here. And in the main data source for my second form, just let it resolve here for a second, my other field is called not field 1. So super helpful, I know. Let's take a look at these in the browser, and let me show you a few ways you can kind of diagnose this problem. We're going to do a transform first. Sorry, got to pop over here again and find my, you know what, I'm just going to end the slideshow so I can find my taskbar. How's that sound? And get to Notepad. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open up this guy, and I'm going to open up, this is before the fixed version of qRules, and I'm going to open up another one that's also before the fixed version. This one is B. Okay, so here we've got, if we look at the XSN location, sorry to make you kind of like squint at the browser bar, but it is what it is in terms of the browser bar address size. But you can see this guy is prefix XSN, right? And this guy over here is prefix B. Scroll back this way. So these are all with the recently released version of 7.1 in them. We would anticipate you'd see the same problem in earlier versions of qRules if your admin deploy forms are affected. So I've got my command node here. I've set post back to always because otherwise the command isn't going to run. And I'm going to run a transform command, and I'll just copy this out and paste it over, but I'll show it to you so you see it. So what I'm doing here is I'm basically applying the upgrade transform to template XML. I'm returning the result as a string to not field 1. Okay, and so I'm going to tab out. Whoops, hey, it selected the wrong command. Autocomplete is such a blessing. Let's try again. And let's see, make sure that it's going to believe me on this. Okay, so what I want to show you is down here. Now this is the result I would anticipate. This is returning the schema for this form. Form B has not field 1 as its field. So now I'm going to run a similar command that's also using template XML for the source file and upgrade XSL for the transform. And I'm going to run it over here. Now you'll recall that this is my form that has field 1 in the main data source. This is the one with field 1. In fact, I'm returning my XML to field 1. That's my destination path. So I'm going to tab out. So if we look down here and see what XML is returned for us, we can see that what was returned is the XML for the other form. And that is because of a caching issue. So we had in qRules code that was caching these XSDs in order to try to be more efficient, be more performant, not have to go grab them every single time if you were running the transform multiple times in a single session. And what we ended up with was getting our wires crossed all of a sudden, and we're pulling back the incorrect upgrade for this particular template. Now what we were seeing in swap DOM was similar. We were pulling back the incorrect upgrade XSL because the swap DOM with document command, what that does is it goes and gets a document from DBXL, and then it can apply the upgrade XSL to it, and then it replaces the main data source in your XML with that other form. So if you're doing something like, in this particular scenario, people wanted to be able to scan in a barcode, and if there was already a form filled out for that item, it would get loaded in. And so swap DOM with document works really well with that in a DBXL environment, but it was failing because we'd get a schema validation error. Here is a basic transform that you can use if you want to, let's say, reset a form. Let's say you just want the ability to push a button and reset your form so it's all back to blank. So this is a basic kind of a reset transform. It's going to use template XML, upgrade XSL. But because of this mismatch in the caching, if I tab out now, you'll see I get an error, right, in this one because of the schema validation. It found non-data type errors. And we know why it's finding those. It's because it's returning the wrong upgrade XSL. If I go to the first form that I used a transform command in, this one, and do the same thing, I get my form reset. You can see that gets cleared. I'll show you quickly the issue with input parameters, and then we'll move on and take a quick look at the fixed forms. This is just kind of to help you understand ways you can see what the problem is. Now you can see here in this URL I've passed in an input parameter of a bunch of A's, and I'm opening this same form prefix prior to fixing 7.1, and if I run a get input parameter command here and just tab out, right, I get back the result of all A's. And if I go back over here and I'm going to open this form again with an input parameter of all Z's, okay, and I'm just going to hit enter here and it reloads, and I'm going to run this same get input parameter command, right, and we get back Z's. This is all as we would anticipate. But if we were to run get input parameter here again in our first form, where we, whoa, hey, that was cool. Let's go ahead and close that. Where we originally had all A's returned, and I hit tab, you can see now we're getting Z's back. So that is a sign of an issue there with get input parameters. We're getting a mismatch. I think this is less likely to be happening in a production form because, generally speaking, we're running get input parameter on the Qdabra rules finish loading node. Okay, but it is something you can use to kind of quickly determine whether or not you've got a problem in your environment with this issue. So I wanted to show you that as well. And again, I'll include these commands in a little notes file so that you can just kind of copy paste and get a sense of them. And I'll include my URLs that I'm using too, so you can kind of see those. So here is a fixed form. And this, you can see I'm passing in, oh, hey, I just helpfully pointed at the monitor. That was great. But you can see here I'm passing in the same input parameter of IP, and this one says test param 1. So this is one fixed form. And in this other one, I'm going to use a different input parameter. You see how this says new test param. So they're different. And then we can do the same kind of situation here, too. We'll do get input parameter, and we'll tab, and you can see we're getting back test param 1, which is what we expect. So far, so good. And we will assume that we're going to get the right input parameter here, and we do, new test parameter. Now in our other ones, when we switched back to our initial form and we ran get input parameter a second time, we got the mismatch. We got the wrong input parameter back. However, now with our fixed build, we no longer get that. We've done some modifications to the code to prevent this kind of crisscrossing effect with things like get input parameter and swapped on with document. And at this point, this latest fix has been in production on that same high-use client site where we saw the initial issue. And I'm sorry, I'm referring to it as my lost weekend, right? And so, you know, we've had it in production now for going on 2 weeks. We've seen no regressions in this issue. So I highly encourage you, if you are using admin deployed forms, I've not been able to reproduce this in a sandbox form, and I do not anticipate it would reproduce in a sandbox form. I do not believe you would have any problem whatsoever in a filler form. It's an entirely different environment. So I'm talking only about admin deployed forms. So if you're running admin deployed forms in your environment, I encourage you to throw a debug view on there, get your command field in there, get these execution results in there, and go test it in your environment. And if you're affected, definitely it's time to get qRules 7.1 into your form. We have just upgraded the web store with all of the latest, so everything should be out there for you. I'm going to go ahead and just kick this slideshow back off here. Oh, let's swap and boogie back over to the post-demo stuff. So kind of here's the wrap-up. Only seen it in admin deployed forms. The most likely places we've seen this is swapped on with document. We get a schema validation error there from the qRules command. Transform. We were seeing those in forms that we were doing this reset in. It was getting back the wrong upgrade XSL, and we were using that to reset in these particular forms. We had a lot of logic around after submitting. It just reset as a blank form, and we used that transform command for that. And then, as you could see, get input parameter can certainly show you if you have the issue. I do have a little DBXL bonus. I want to highlight and point out, if you're using DBXL 2.4 and later, Jimmy has a new blog post up, and here's the URL to it, that talks about getting back individual files from an XSN that's a DBXL document type. So sometimes we want to get back schema or template XML or upgrade XSL. As you can see, we make a lot of use of those in some of the form work we do. And so this will give you some information on how to configure things so that you can get back files using DBXL as well. Future webinars. This is the upcoming stuff that we know of so far. I'm guessing there's going to be some other stuff in here in May, but these are the ones that we've kind of got titles up for at this point. If you go ahead and fill out the webinar survey, you're going to get the entire little packet, including the 2 forms that are fixed with the old broken version of qRules, and these 2 forms that have been injected already with the fix. So it might make it easier for you to use those for test forms in your environment. And like I said, I'll include my little notes that have the URLs and so forth in them. So this was extremely short for me, and I'm sure I still kind of managed to talk your ears off. But does anybody have any questions? I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. And I'll just give people a minute in case they have something. Okay, so I do see we've got a question, and I'm going to pop this out so I can see it a little bit better. Oh, it was deleted. She mentioned, should we ask for a show of hands from people that are using admin deployed forms? That's really a good idea. So, I think can you guys raise your hands here in the webinar interface? Deline, raise your hand for me. No, people can. Okay. So I was just wondering who was using admin deployed forms. I'm seeing a couple of hands going up. Um, One hand I see, I want to assure you that at least your newest form has this fix in place. We'll talk about it more later today, Michael. So at any rate, if you've got admin deploy, it doesn't look like very many people do, which is great because that means you're not probably affected by this. If you've got admin deploy and you're using these particular commands, especially, I encourage you to check your environment. So that was it for me. I just wanted to highlight this. We wanted to get this news out there, let you guys know about it, give you some information on it, and that's all I've got. I hope everybody has a great day. Do fill out the survey and we'll send stuff along to you. And I think that's all I've got. Thanks so much for attending.